The vast, arid land stretched endlessly under a scorching sun. The earth cracked and parched, as if it had long given up on any hope of water. The air shimmered with heat, and the ground seemed to ripple with every passing moment. Tucked away in this desolate region stood a dilapidated farmhouse, its paint peeling and its roof sagging under the weight of time. The only sounds were the occasional clink of metal and the distant bleating of sheep, the remnants of a place that had once known prosperity but now lingered in decay. In this harsh environment lived a mother and her young daughter, Sophie. The mother, strong and dedicated, had toiled on the land for years. Her calloused hands told the story of her relentless labor. She was the heart of the ranch, mending fences, tending to animals, and holding everything together as the land slowly withered. Her eyes carried a quiet sadness, a testament to her struggles and solitude. She was the last of her family to cling to this land, determined to keep it alive despite overwhelming odds. Sophie, only 8 years old, already bore the weight of responsibility on her small shoulders. Her bright eyes sparkled with hope, even in this unforgiving world. She adored her mother, inspired by her strength, and helped with small tasks, though she barely understood their gravity. Young as she was, Sophie knew their survival depended on the land and their shared effort. But even her mother, who never gave up, was beginning to show signs of breaking under the strain. Next door lay a starkly different world, the ranch of Mr. Hargrave. His fields were green, his fences sturdy, and his home gleamed with prosperity. Hargrave, a tall, imposing man with a weathered face, was known for his ruthless business tactics, taking what he wanted and crushing opposition. His grip on the land was nearly absolute, and neighboring ranchers feared crossing him. For years, he had tried to buy Sophie's mother's ranch, but her refusals had worn his patience thin. Now he was ready to act. One blistering afternoon, as the heat blurred the horizon, Sophie was tending a small, struggling garden her mother had planted. It was a simple chore that gave her purpose amidst the dust. Pausing to wipe her brow, she spotted something alarming in the distance. Her heart raced as she saw her mother tied to a large rock, hands bound tightly, her face red from the sun and her hair matted. Sophie's instinct was to run to her, to free her, but as she stepped forward, she saw him. Hargrave stood watching, his cold, calculating eyes fixed on her. His silent fury filled the air, freezing Sophie in place. Her heart pounded as she took shaky steps toward her mother. "Mom," she cried, her voice trembling with fear and confusion. "What happened? Why are you tied up?" But before she could reach her, Hargrave's low, menacing voice cut through. "Stay back, girl," he warned, his tone steady but laced with threat. Sophie froze, her breath shallow. She didn't understand why this was happening. Her mother had always taught her to stand up for herself. Why hadn't she fought back? Hargrave's silent anger was terrifying, his gaze like a predator's. "Please, sir," Sophie pleaded softly, her voice full of a child's desperation. "Let her go. She's my mom. She hasn't done anything to you." Her words fell into the stifling heat, unanswered. Hargrave stood motionless, his icy stare unwavering. The sun beat down, and the only sound was the rustle of dry grass in the wind. Sophie felt the weight of her world pressing in, but she refused to give up. Her mother needed her, and she would never stop trying to save her. Sophie stood frozen, the sun burning down on her mother. The air carried the weight of a struggle older than she could grasp. The ranch wasn't just land. It was their family's legacy, passed from her grandfather to her father and now to her mother. Sophie had overheard fragments of the story from her mother and rare visitors. The land held memories, dreams, and years of toil. It was more than soil and trees. Sophie's mother had never imagined she'd bear the ranch's burden alone. Her husband's sudden death years ago had shattered everything. One moment, They were working the fields together, laughing over coffee. The next, he was gone, leaving her to raise Sophie and keep the ranch alive. She had no time to grieve, only resolve. She took on his role, shielding Sophie from the loss, but it wasn't enough. The ranch was failing, resources dwindling, and the land's harshness was undeniable. Then came Hargrave. His ranch bordered theirs, a sprawling estate with sturdy barns and fields that never seemed to dry. Hargrave had watched their struggles and offered help. Not charity, but a buyout. His offers came repeatedly, each more tempting. He wanted Sophie's mother to sell, and for a time, it seemed like the only way out. But she refused. The land was her husband's legacy, and selling it would mean losing him forever. No amount of money could replace that. She ignored the pressures of the outside world. This land was theirs, and she wouldn't let it go. As years passed, tensions grew. Hargrave's patience waned, and Sophie's mother felt the strain. Crops failed, fences broke, and animals became another burden. Yet she stood firm, rejecting every offer. Hargrave took it personally. His quiet demeanor hid a simmering rage, and he made it clear he wouldn't let her stand alone, no matter the cost. Today, that rage had boiled over. Sophie's mother, always strong, was faltering under the blistering sun, tied to that rock. Her head hung low, her face burnt, her lips cracked. Sophie couldn't fathom why Hargrave had gone this far. What had her mother done to deserve this? Heart pounding, Sophie ran to her mother's side. "Mom," she called, her voice breaking. "What happened?" But before she could reach her, Hargrave's cold gaze stopped her. He said nothing, his presence a threat in itself. He was punishing her mother, and Sophie was powerless to stop it. "Please, sir," Sophie begged. "Let her go. She's my mom. She's done nothing wrong." Her words vanished into the heat, ignored. Hargrave's face remained stone cold. Sophie's heart broke. Why was this happening? Her mother was only trying to hold their family together. Hargrave didn't care. She'd heard whispers of his cruelty, but facing it now was different. She stepped closer, but his deep voice halted her. "I said stay back," he warned, calm but predatory. Sophie froze, wanting to scream, to free her mother, but fear held her back. She'd never seen her mother so helpless. She didn't know how to fix this. Looking at her mother's closed eyes and pale face, Sophie's throat tightened. She had to act. She couldn't watch her mother suffer. But what could a little girl do? "Mom, please," Sophie whispered, glancing at Hargrave. "Let her go. She's all I have." His gaze softened briefly, then hardened again. He stood silent, watching her with disdain. To him, this was just a means to force her mother to sell. Sophie's heart ached with the weight of what she couldn't change. Her mother wasn't just fighting for land. She was fighting for something deeper. Why did it have to come to this? Why did Hargrave want the land so badly? Sophie didn't know, but she knew she couldn't let her mother suffer. She had to stop this. Sophie's heart raced as she glanced back, ensuring Hargrave wasn't watching. Her small feet moved quietly across the dry ground, the sun still blazing down. Her mother had been tied to the rock for hours, and Sophie's resolve grew stronger with each moment. She had to act. Her tiny fists clenched as she thought of the injustice. Her mother treated like nothing, as if she had no right to fight for her land. Sophie wasn't like others. She wouldn't give up. Despite her age, Sophie felt a fierce need to protect her mother, the one constant in her life, the one who held everything together. Now, with her mother helpless, it was Sophie's turn to be strong. She couldn't back down. She had to free her. Her mind raced as she crept around the ranch's edges. The silence was eerie, but she kept moving, her steps light and quick. She didn't know what she was looking for, but something, anything, had to help. Her eyes scanned for tools, a weakness in Hargrave's defenses. Her thoughts were scattered, but one thing was clear. She had to act now. Her heart pounded as she neared the barn, hoping to find something useful. She slipped inside, careful not to make a sound. The barn smelled of hay and old wood, once a comforting scent, now heavy with tension. Everything felt different since Hargrave's threat. She moved along the walls, her hands brushing the rough surfaces, searching. Her breath caught when she spotted a small box under a pile of straw. Heart racing, she pulled it out. It was old and weathered, forgotten for years. She opened it carefully and found a folded letter, its edges frayed and stained. Trembling, she unfolded it, squinting at the faded handwriting. The letter, written in shaky script, detailed a deal between her father and Hargrave, one never finalized. It suggested Hargrave had no true claim to the land he coveted. Sophie's mind raced. This letter could change everything, proof her family needed to fight back. Her heart surged as she clutched the letter. Hargrave claimed the land was his, but this proved otherwise. She wasn't sure of its full meaning, but it was vital, a key to freeing her mother. But what should she do? Give it to Hargrave and hope he'd release her mother? Or use it to reclaim their land? Her hands shook as she weighed her options. She couldn't afford a mistake. Footsteps interrupted her thoughts. Sophie froze, stuffing the letter back into the box and hiding it behind the straw. Hargrave was coming. Her breath caught as she ducked behind a wooden pillar, her small body trembling. She couldn't let him find her, not when she was so close to saving her mother. Hargrave's heavy boots echoed as he entered the barn. Sophie peeked out, watching him scan the space, his eyes cold and calculating. He hadn't seen her. She held her breath, praying he'd leave. She couldn't be caught now. His eyes narrowed as he stopped in the barn's center. "Sophie," he called, his voice low and menacing. "I know you're here. Come out." Her heart skipped. Fear crept up her spine, but she knew she had to stay calm. Slowly, she stepped out, keeping her movements quiet. Hargrave's gaze locked onto her, the air thick with tension. "What are you doing here, girl?" His voice was cold, but something in it made Sophie's skin crawl. He was trying to figure her out. Sophie stood tall, her small frame rigid with resolve. "I'm looking for something to help my mom," she said, her voice steady despite her fear. "I won't let you keep her tied up." "You're wrong, sir. This land isn't yours." Hargrave's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You don't know what you're talking about, girl," he said. "This land is mine. Your mother doesn't get it, and neither do you." Sophie clenched her fists. "No, my mom knows what she's doing, and I know what's right. This isn't yours. I have proof." She glanced at the hidden box. The letter. Hargrave's smile faded, suspicion taking its place. "Proof? What proof do you have?" Sophie hesitated, her mind racing. Should she tell him? Risk everything? She had no choice. She needed her mother free. But giving him the letter meant no turning back. "I have something that says this land belongs to my family. And it says you lied," Sophie said, her voice growing stronger. "I don't care what you say. I won't let you hurt her anymore." Hargrave's eyes flickered. Fear or anger, Sophie couldn't tell. He stepped closer, towering over her. "You don't know what you're dealing with, girl," he said, his voice low and sharp. "You think you'll stop me? Think again." But Sophie didn't back down. She stood her ground, heart racing but resolve unshaken. She wouldn't let him win. Not this time. Sophie's mind raced as she spent the next few days wandering the ranch, her heart heavy with all that had happened. She had no choice now but to turn the tide. Her mother's life, their home, and their family's land were at stake. Hargrave's cruelty had pushed them to the edge, and Sophie knew that without quick action, her mother might not survive. She couldn't let him win. The more she learned about the ranch's history, the deeper the conflict seemed. Sophie had heard snippets of a land dispute before, whispers from her mother and neighbors, but it had never felt so urgent. Hargrave had been trying to force her family off the land for years. It wasn't just business, it was personal. Her mother had inherited the ranch from her father, and Hargrave had always wanted it. But her mother, determined to preserve her family's legacy, rejected every offer. Now, Sophie understood the full weight of the fight. Hargrave was merciless. He didn't just want the land. He wanted to break her mother's spirit, to make her feel she had no choice but to sell. He thought pressure would make her give in. But Sophie wasn't her mother. She wouldn't back down. She had something Hargrave hadn't anticipated, a secret that could change everything. The letter. It was the key. Hargrave thought he could control the land and her family, but Sophie now knew there was a way out. The letter, hidden and forgotten for years, held the truth, proof that Hargrave's claims were lies. It was the leverage she needed, but she had to be careful. If Hargrave learned the secret, he'd stop at nothing to destroy it. And her mother. Sophie's heart was heavy as she headed to Hargrave's house one morning. Her mother's condition had worsened. The sunburn had turned to blisters, and she hadn't eaten. Sophie couldn't bear to see her suffer. The time had come. She had to confront Hargrave, reveal the secret, and force him to back off. At Hargrave's door, her hands trembled, but she refused to let fear win. She had come too far to turn back. She had the truth. Taking a deep breath, she knocked. Hargrave opened the door, his eyes narrowing at the sight of her. "What do you want, girl?" he asked, his voice flat and cold. Sophie stepped forward, her voice steady despite her racing thoughts. "I know what you've been hiding," she said, holding out the letter. "I know about the deal you made with my father, and that you have no right to this land. You lied to us. You've been trying to force my mom to sell, but you can't. This land belongs to my family." Hargrave's face hardened as he took the letter and read it, his eyes scanning quickly. Sophie saw the tension in his jaw, his knuckles white as he gripped the paper. He was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "So, you found the truth," he said finally, his voice cold. "It changes nothing. This land was never yours. Your father didn't know what he was doing. He was a fool to hold on to it. But he's gone now, and you're just a child. You don't know the battles I've fought to get here." Sophie's heart skipped as she listened. He was blaming her father, painting her family as the villains. But she wouldn't let him twist the story. "You don't get to talk about my father like that," Sophie said, her voice rising with anger. "He was a good man. He worked hard for this land, and you have no right to take it. You're the one who's been cruel. You're the one trying to tear our family apart." Hargrave's cold demeanor faltered briefly, and Sophie saw a flicker in his eyes, regret or shame, gone quickly. He took a deep breath and looked at the letter. "You don't understand," he said quietly. "This land, it's all I've ever wanted. It's everything to me. You wouldn't know what it's like to lose everything, to fight for what's yours. This isn't just about land. It's about survival, control. I've fought my whole life to keep anyone from taking that from me." Sophie stood silent, stunned. She'd expected anger, not this glimpse of vulnerability. It didn't justify his actions, but it showed her a piece of who he was. "I know what it's like to lose someone," Sophie said softly. "I know what it's like to lose everything. But that doesn't give you the right to take what's ours. My mom has fought for this land her whole life. It's her home, and I won't let you take it." Hargrave looked at her, his face hardening again. "You think this is about right and wrong?" he asked, his voice rising. "This is about power, and you're too young to understand. You don't know what it takes to survive in this world. I've made hard choices, and if that means crushing you to get what I want, I will." Sophie's heart pounded as she realized the depth of his bitterness. But she wouldn't let him win. She had the truth. She had the secret, and she wouldn't let him destroy her family. "I'm not afraid of you," Sophie said, her voice strong again. "And I won't let you take what's ours. I'll fight for this land. I'll fight for my mom. And I'll make sure you don't win." Hargrave stared at her, his face a mask of anger and frustration. He crumpled the letter and threw it to the ground. "You'll regret this," he muttered, his eyes burning with rage. But Sophie stood her ground. She had made her choice. The battle for the ranch wasn't over, but she was ready to fight with everything she had. The sun burned hotter on Sophie's mother as the days dragged on. Each hour felt like an eternity as Sophie watched her mother's condition worsen. Her once strong body was weak from the heat and the strain of being bound. Her face, once vibrant, was pale and sweaty, her skin cracking. Sophie saw desperation in her mother's eyes, and the weight of it crushed her. She feared the worst. Her mother was slipping away, and Sophie was helpless. Every minute mattered, and every minute felt too late. Sophie's heart broke as she rushed to her mother's side, trying to cool her with water from the well. The ropes had left deep red marks on her mother's wrists. Sophie's small hands shook as she tried to untie them, but they were too tight, and her fear made her clumsy. Tears welled up as she struggled, feeling utterly powerless. "Mom, please," Sophie whispered, her voice breaking. "Don't give up. I'll fix this. I promise." But as the hours stretched, Sophie knew time was running out. She couldn't keep this up forever. Her mother needed medical help, and no one was around to provide it. Sophie was out of options. Hargrave's silence, his cold eyes, and his refusal to help haunted her. She felt pressure building in her chest, suffocating her. She had to act, do anything, to show him her mother was a person, not a pawn in his land dispute. Sophie knew she couldn't wait any longer. She had to face Hargrave, even if it meant risking everything. She had to make him see reason. With a final glance at her mother, Sophie stood, wiped her tear-streaked face, and walked toward Hargrave's house. The distance felt endless, yet each step was a leap forward. Her heart raced, her mind a storm of thoughts. What if he didn't listen? What if he pushed her away? What if her mother didn't survive? Sophie didn't know how much longer her mother could endure the scorching sun. She didn't know how long her own resolve would hold. But one thing she knew, she would never stop trying to save her mother. Not now, not ever. At Hargrave's house, she found him outside, staring at the land he'd fought so hard to control. He didn't notice her at first, but as she approached, his sharp eyes turned to her. His expression was hard, unreadable. Sophie took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I know what you're doing," Sophie said, her voice trembling but firm. "You try to break my mom's spirit, but it won't work. She won't give up, and neither will I." Hargrave's eyes narrowed, and he stepped toward her. "You don't know anything about me, girl," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You don't know what I've been through, what I've sacrificed to get here." Sophie's heart skipped, but she refused to back down. "I don't need to know your pain. I just know my mom deserves better than this. She's a person. She's my mom." For a moment, Hargrave was silent, his gaze locked on Sophie. Then, slowly, his lips curled into a chilling smile. "You think this is about your mom?" he said, his voice dripping with bitterness. "This isn't about her. It's about control, power. I've worked my whole life to build this place, to be something. You think your mom and her little piece of land will stop me? No, I'll take what I need, and if that means breaking her, breaking you, I will." Sophie's blood ran cold as she realized the depth of his cruelty. He wasn't just fighting for land. He was fighting for power, and he'd stop at nothing to get it. Her mother's suffering meant nothing to him. She was just an obstacle to crush. But Sophie wouldn't let him win. She had to show him her mother was more than a piece in his game. She had to make him see his actions were wrong. "Please," Sophie pleaded, stepping closer. "Look at my mom. Look at what you're doing to her. She's not just a piece of land. She's a person. She deserves respect. I know you've been hurt, but you don't have to hurt others to get what you want. Please, don't let her die out there. Don't let her suffer anymore. Let her go." Hargrave's face twisted with anger as Sophie's words hit home. His fist clenched, his jaw tight. For a moment, Sophie thought she saw a crack in his defenses, a flicker of something in his eyes. But it vanished, replaced by cold fury. "You don't get it, do you?" Hargrave spat, his voice shaking. "You don't know what I've done to survive. I've lost everything, and I'll be damned if I let you or anyone take this from me." Sophie's heart ached for him, but she knew this wasn't the time for pity. She had to stay focused. This isn't about survival anymore. It's about revenge, and it's not worth it. You don't have to keep doing this. Hargrave stepped closer, his face inches from hers. "You have no idea what I've been through. What's like to lose everything. This land is all I have left. You think your mom is the victim? You're both just pawns in a game, I've been playing for years. Sophie stood her ground, no matter how close he came. You can't fix your past by destroying others' futures, she said, her voice steady despite her fear. You can stop this. You can change. Please. For a long moment, Hargrave didn't move. His eyes were fixed on Sophie, his breathing shallow. The silence was heavy with everything said. Then, something unexpected happened. Hargrave's shoulders slumped slightly. The anger in his eyes dimmed, replaced by something else. Regret, perhaps, or sorrow. Sophie wasn't sure, but for the first time, she saw him hesitate. I've done terrible things, he muttered, barely audible. I thought I had to, but I don't know anymore. Sophie didn't respond. She watched him, waiting for his choice. And in that moment, Sophie knew Hargrave's fight wasn't just against her mother. It was against himself. The sun was dipping below the horizon when Sophie, clutching the letter tightly, decided she couldn't face Hargrave alone. Her heart pounded with fear, but also with determination. She needed help, someone strong enough to stand by her side. She ran to Jacob, the neighboring rancher who had always been kind to her and her mother. She found him mending a fence near his ranch, his face etched with concern as she explained her mother's plight and the letter's truth. Jacob, please, Sophie pleaded, her voice shaking. I found proof that Hargrave's lying about our land, but he's got my mom tied up, and I can't save her alone. Will you come with me? Jacob's eyes darkened with resolve. He dropped his tools, his voice firm. Sophie, you're brave to do this. I'm with you. Let's get your mom back. Together, they headed to Hargrave's house, the letter in Sophie's trembling hands. When Hargrave stepped out, the tension was thick. Sophie, with Jacob at her side, felt a surge of courage. Hargrave, tall and imposing, eyed them both, his gaze narrowing at Jacob's presence. His eyes held less certainty than before, the cracks in his cold facade showing. I've got something that belongs to you, Sophie said, her voice firm as she stepped forward, Jacob standing protectively beside her. She held out the letter, watching Hargrave's eyes flick to it with interest. He took it, his hands trembling slightly as he unfolded it. His eyes scanned the words quickly, and Sophie saw his expression shift, confusion, then anger. But she wasn't done. This letter wasn't just paper. It was proof of everything he'd done to her family. This letter proves it, Sophie said, her voice cutting through the silence. It proves you lied. You manipulated my family, made deals that weren't yours to make. You thought you could take everything from us, but you were wrong. Jacob stepped forward, his voice steady and commanding. Hargrave, you've gone too far. Let Sophie's mother go. This land isn't yours, and this letter proves it. End this now, or you'll face more than just us. Hargrave looked up, his face hardening. His anger flared, but beneath it was something darker. The weight of his past was catching up, evident in his eyes. Sophie saw guilt, regret, and the realization that his actions would have consequences. He turned to Jacob, his voice low and defensive. You don't know what I've fought for, Jacob. This land is mine by right. You're meddling in things you don't understand. Jacob didn't flinch. I understand enough. You're hurting a woman and her child for your own greed. That's not right, and you know it. Let her go, Hargrave, or I'll make sure everyone knows what you've done. You've hurt my family for so long, Sophie added, her voice trembling but resolute. You've taken our land, our legacy, our peace, and now you're trying to destroy my mom. But she's not the one who's broken here. You are. For a moment, Hargrave didn't respond. His jaw clenched, and Sophie saw the conflict in him, between who he'd become and who he'd once hoped to be. She'd uncovered the truth, and with Jacob's support, it was too much for him to ignore. What do you want me to say, girl? He asked, his voice low and weary. That I've done terrible things? I know that, but I did what I thought I had to do to survive. I didn't know another way to keep from losing everything. Sophie's eyes softened, but she didn't relent. There's always another way, she said. You don't have to keep fighting us. You don't have to keep punishing my family. This land isn't yours. It belongs to my mom, to me, and you've taken enough." Hargrave's face twisted with frustration. He turned away briefly, gripping the letter tightly. He didn't want to admit it, didn't want to face the truth, but the presence of Jacob and the undeniable proof in the letter weighed heavily on him. Seeing Hargrave's hesitation, Jacob took a step closer, his voice calm but unyielding. "Hargrave, you're done. Free Sophie's mother now, or I'll take this letter to the sheriff. You can't fight the truth." Hargrave's shoulders slumped, the fight draining from him. He muttered something under his breath, then nodded slowly. "Fine," he said, his voice barely audible. "Take her. But this isn't over." Sophie didn't wait for him to change his mind. She and Jacob rushed to the rock where her mother was bound, still waiting for freedom. Sophie's heart raced as she loosened the ropes, her small hands working frantically. Jacob helped, his strong hands making quick work of the knots. Her mother's face was pale, her eyes barely open, but as the ropes fell, she looked at Sophie and Jacob with relief and disbelief. "Sophie, Jacob," her mother whispered weakly. "You did it. You saved me." Sophie didn't reply. She helped her mother to her feet, with Jacob supporting her other side. Together, they faced Hargrave one last time. "I'm not going anywhere," Sophie's mother said, her voice growing stronger despite her weakness. "You've taken enough from us. We're done with you." Hargrave stood silent, his eyes narrowing as he watched them stand together, stronger than ever. He was defeated. His fight was over. The land he'd fought for was never his, and now he'd lost everything. "I'll make sure you answer for what you've done," Sophie said, her voice steady. "You won't hurt us anymore." Hargrave didn't respond, but Sophie saw it in his eyes. He knew she was right. He had lost. He destroyed his own chance at redemption, and there was nothing he could do now. As Sophie and Jacob carefully supported her mother back toward their ranch, the weight of the journey seemed to press down on them from all sides. Sophie's eyes were brimming with tears, the pain of seeing her mother so frail and exhausted tugging at her heartstrings. Yet, despite the exhaustion, despite the oppressive heat that had drained them all, a tiny flicker of hope stirred in Sophie's chest. The road ahead was still long, and the burden of her mother's weakened state was heavy on Sophie's young shoulders, but the fact that they were alive, together, gave her something to hold on to. Her mother, still weak from the sun's merciless rays, stumbled with each step. The heat had drained her, leaving her pale and trembling, but her spirit remained strong. Sophie could feel her mother's resolve, though it was clear that the woman needed rest. As they slowly made their way forward, the farmhouse in the distance seemed like an oasis, though Sophie knew it would be hours before they reached it. Jacob's unwavering presence beside them, his steady footsteps, and his silent strength made her feel safe, protected in a world that had felt increasingly unpredictable. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they reached Jacob's home. It was humble, but it was a sanctuary. Jacob quickly ushered them inside, where the coolness of the interior offered a brief but welcome relief from the oppressive heat. His hands were gentle yet sure as he carefully took her mother to a bed, offering her a clean glass of water. Sophie watched, mesmerized by the tenderness with which he cared for her mother, tending to her wounds, wiping away the dust and sweat from her brow. Jacob's kindness, so unexpected yet so pure, filled Sophie with a sense of awe. He didn't ask for anything in return. His only concern was their well-being. When he offered them food, it was a gesture that went beyond mere hospitality. It was a lifeline in a moment of crisis. For a fleeting moment, Sophie allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be okay. The world outside still held its challenges, but within these walls, they had found a place of refuge, a small glimmer of peace amid the chaos. Sophie looked at her mother, who was now resting comfortably, and then back at Jacob, a quiet sense of gratitude filling her heart. She had always thought of herself as strong, the one who would protect her mother. But now, in this moment, She realized that sometimes it's the kindness of strangers that carries you through when you can't carry yourself. Over the next few days, Sophie's mother's health gradually began to improve. It was a slow process, but every small step was a victory. At Jacob's ranch, they found more than just a place to rest. They found a new sense of life, one filled with the warmth of care and community. Jacob's generosity wasn't limited to shelter and food. He gave them work to do, allowing Sophie to feel useful and her mother to regain her strength in the process. Sophie helped with the lighter chores around the ranch, feeding the chickens, cleaning the stables, and gathering eggs. Her hands were busy, but her mind was at ease, and each task reminded her that things were slowly shifting from despair to hope. Her mother, too, was slowly recovering. She spent much of her time resting in a cozy corner of the ranch house, but every now and then, Sophie would catch a glimpse of her mother's smile. It wasn't a smile of pain or weariness, but one of relief, of returning strength. Sophie could see a spark in her eyes that had been absent for so long, and it filled her heart with warmth. They were for the first time in what felt like forever beginning to heal. Jacob's ranch became their sanctuary. The land was beautiful, lush with green grass, rolling hills, and animals that roamed freely under the open sky. There was a peacefulness here that Sophie had never known before, a tranquility that seemed to seep into every corner of the ranch. The barn, the farmhouse, the fields, everything seemed to hum with the rhythm of a quiet life. Sophie could feel herself beginning to change too, the heavy weight of fear and loss starting to lift off her shoulders. But as with all things that seemed too good to be true, the peace didn't last. One afternoon, as Sophie worked alongside Jacob in the fields, a change in the air warned of something different. The birds fell silent, and the once gentle wind began to pick up. It wasn't the weather that had shifted, though. It was the arrival of men. Men who had been tied to the land disputes of the past, enemies of Jacob's who had once fought to claim what wasn't rightfully theirs. These men weren't here for a friendly visit. Their presence felt ominous, their faces hard and determined. They had come to intimidate Jacob, and more importantly, to take Sophie's mother back, pulling her into the heart of the land dispute once more. They were determined to use her to reignite the battle that had caused so much pain. Jacob, ever the protector, didn't flinch. He stood his ground, his presence as steady as the land itself. His voice, when he spoke, was calm but unyielding. "This land is no longer part of any dispute," he said, his words carrying weight. "This woman and her daughter are part of my home now. You have no right to touch them." The men sneered, their eyes narrowing, and the tension thickened in the air. Sophie could feel her heart race as she watched the confrontation unfold. She wanted to run, to hide, but she remained frozen, watching Jacob stand tall in front of these dangerous men. The enemies, unable to intimidate him with words alone, resorted to violence. The brief skirmish that followed was chaotic but quick. Jacob, with the help of his workers, fought back fiercely, his determination unshakable. The men who had come to intimidate them were driven off, retreating in defeat, their plans thwarted by Jacob's courage. Sophie and her mother watched from a distance, their hearts swelling with gratitude and awe for the man who had not only given them refuge, but had now protected them from a past that sought to pull them back into its grip. Sophie could hardly believe it. Jacob had done more than just save them. He had given them a new life, a fresh start. And with each victory, she felt herself growing stronger too. Jacob had shown them the true meaning of safety. It wasn't just the absence of danger, but the presence of someone who would fight for you, someone who would stand in the face of adversity and refuse to back down. In that moment, Sophie knew that no matter what the future held, they would be okay, as long as they were together with Jacob by their side. As time passed, Jacob, Sophie, and her mother became a family. Sophie's mother, once weighed by sorrow, found joy working alongside Jacob. A deep bond grew between them. First friendship, then love. Jacob didn't just offer shelter. He gave them a place in his heart. Sophie watched them, a new hope blooming that things could be okay. One evening, as the sun set, Jacob, Sophie, and her mother sat together outside their new home, looking over the land. The earth was still dry, but their hearts held a new kind of green. Hargrave's shadow was gone, and his enemies had retreated. The sheriff, with the evidence Sophie provided, had arrested Hargrave, and the land dispute was over. Sophie held her mother's hand, and her mother looked at Jacob with a smile. "We did it," her mother said softly. Sophie nodded, her heart full of relief and sorrow. "We did," she agreed, feeling the weight of their journey. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, Sophie saw a glimmer of hope. Jacob looked at them, his eyes filled with love. "We're together," he said. "That's enough." And so, the sun set over the ranch, casting a golden glow. The past was behind them, and a new chapter began. Sophie, her mother, and Jacob lived happily as a new family, their love and courage building a new life together.